Alright, everybody. Not doing Let's Defend or Cyber Defenders today. Um, we have another It Came from Reddit. I think this is now the third one that I've done. Shout out to Brad for going through and finding something that kind of fits the previous ones and wanting me to sit there and take a look at it. So this one I didn't have a whole lot of direct interaction with until basically it was pointed off. I've got it up in the background, but Brad reached out to me and said, like, "Hey, I got something that you might want to take a look at, but we need to borrow your password cracking rig." Um, at the time, the poster did not remember what the password was for the game in order to extract it from the RAR file. So I was going to go through, did John the Ripper started that off, and apparently they remembered what the password was. So, I mean, saved me some time, at least on that particular aspect. But effectively what we have in r/cybersecurity_help by Nick, recovering after a virus. On Monday, I got a message from an old friend on Discord, which automatically should be suspect, which is sad nowadays, but with how quickly accounts are taken, everything else like that, considering the fact that there really is not that great of a way to go through and stop session cookie hijacking. Asking to try out a game. Another red flag. I had the guard down, stupidly installed it. Okay, I mean, at least after the fact, you can kind of beat yourself up slightly. I bet you that this Nick person will never fall for something like this again. Immediately, my Discord was hijacked, and the hacker had a list of all my passwords. So they fought for control of the accounts, ended up losing two less important ones, and of course, Nick is now paranoid. They did a factory reset, wiped, I'm assuming they mean formatted their D drive, so they must have either one big drive partitioned into two or two separate drives. So they did 3 full different AV scans. Everything came up clean, which you would tend to expect. Apparently something about a Google alert detecting malware on the system and signed them out. That part I didn't really get into. I was more interested in the aspect. So I don't know as to whether or not if maybe, okay, whatever this thing is, did more session hijacking and then tried to come in and maybe Google's starting to actually put some sort of detections in place. Be like, hey, this looks extremely weird. You were over, say, North America, and you got a Windows 10 device, but now all of a sudden at the same time we're seeing a login session from Japan with a Windows 8.1 device or something to differentiate between them. So it did the smart thing, shut down, unplugged it, changed the password on the device. Good. Hopefully it was a known clean device. Possible the PC isn't safe, just being paranoid, blah, 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 blah. And I do blah, 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 not as a insult to Nick, because I've only had this happen once in my life. But that was more of a shared machine, so there wasn't really... I think the only thing that was on it was a bunch of movies and Minecraft. But... okay, so apparently it goes to a Maritas, supposedly game. And when I did the initial investigation, which was last weekend, because yes, this is live of a point, this site was down, had been taken down, but apparently it's back. So I think we're just going to go ahead and keep that there, and we'll come back to it. But the site was down, and did not have access to at that particular time, since the site was down, there was no way to pull the RAR file, and we didn't know the password for said RAR file. So we're done, right? At that particular aspect? Not quite. So for those who may not know, cacheview.com will allow you to pop in any URL and you can check for Google's web cached copy of a particular site, page, whatever the case. Or you can do archive.org, or otherwise known as the Internet Wayback Machine. I tend to just think of it more as just Internet Time Machine when I make references to it. But so, and that works in much the same way. Links would stay intact, hosted files to an extent would stay intact, but as we're going to find out, if we just take a look at this here, this looks like, some sort of Metroidvania type of game. I might be tempted to sit there and take a look at it, and it may not show up fully in the bottom left of the screen, but that is a cdn.discordapp.com/attachments /series of numbers /series of numbers /maritasbeta.rar. That was the portion that we were missing. So we could still not even have to, so let's see, did Cached View have anything? No. So it was the Wayback Machine or Internet Time Machine that had a copy of the page still. And it does the same exact portion. Although this looks like this has changed since then. Because I remember it was /attachments/ and I think this first set of numbers started with 6. This starts with 1. So they might have updated this. Yeah, 6120. The other one was like 111. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to download a fresh copy, and then we'll just do the same particular aspect. Extract it, overwrite, and then perform the same type of analysis. Maybe. So CacheView doesn't help, or doesn't have anything here. So that's something to keep in mind if something goes down. The other aspect that you could attempt to approach, if neither of these have anything, maybe it might have been partially archived via urlscan.io. And you can do the search, so you'd probably look for the MaritasGame.blogspot.com and see as to whether or not if that had been checked at any previous time. And I am noticing a little bit of lag here. Wow, OBS Studio is just bulking. Alright, give me 1 second. Let me pause this. Okay, so as it says, it looks like that new link is not currently active, or there's nothing there. I've tried a couple of different web browsers, but this is all that renders in. So the page might have come back, but apparently the payload's not there anymore. So this looks like this has been scanned 16 previous times. No classification. But yeah, so there are numerous other tools you can sit there and try to run through if the site's actually down to try to get some sort of better understanding as to what you're looking at. So effectively, we end up with the same aspect as a few of the other analysis, or it came from Reddits that I've done. So effectively, it was just the password for the RAR was MARITAS beta, so Maritas beta. And that extracted out to I think it's like a 70 meg. Well, if we round up, 69 meg. Maritas game. Let me bring that up. And we've got a couple of detections as it sits. This is refreshed literally at the time of just slightly before I started recording. And this is the 10th of June 2023. So I am doing this the same day that this will go out, barring engagement from work or anything else along those lines. And we get a bunch of different aspects in regards to Trojan Agent, Agent X generic. I mean, the beautiful thing is, at least, okay, Kaspersky picks it up. I mean, interestingly enough, like ABG and Avast pick it up, but yet none of the other major players apparently have an issue with it, which I find extremely interesting, but given the size, we are not able to run it through any.run on a free account. Obviously, if we had a paid-for account, I think they allow you up to 128 megs or something along those lines, maybe even more. Same thing with Integer. I think that is also a 16 or a 25 meg cutoff. And then for those that would sit there and say, well, why don't you go through and just dump the RAR file in? That ends up coming out to roughly 33 megs, so it would still be outside of that particular portion. So not signed. And so we go into triage, since we've got a couple of engines that actually detect it. I don't think the detection has greatly increased in the week since this has actually gone down and we investigated and moved on. But interestingly enough, this thing does not come back as anything major, just a 3 out of 10, which, I mean, I don't know what they did, but it was enough to fool triage. Which is odd because usually triage is the better of the options that are out there. So everything came back effectively from the behavior 1 out of 10. And I do believe I let it run for the full 30 minutes to try to simulate a live system. I mean, I suppose I could always just stand up my own and fire it off. I don't remember there being any sort of mention in regards to sleep aspects in terms of taking like 2-3 weeks for a timer to run down. So that comes up. We get the similar, okay, refresh required, yeah. Because results from the 23rd for virus total said that everything was clean. And here we go, it's confirmation that it is indeed June 10th. It's got a 14% score. Everything is now effectively updating. Again, comes back as a Trojan agent detection. Hashtag evasive. Maybe that explains as to why it was able to sit there and get around triage and only come back with a 1 out of 10 score, or an overall 3 out of 10. Is marked as malicious, 100 out of 100. And then, of course, we have the 2 runs. So the one for May 23rd. AV detection marked as clean, but it was still labeled as Trojan.agent with a 100 out of 100. Spawns a lot of processes. So it looks like it does a lot with PowerShell looking at this. VBox manage. Queries HKey local machine software Microsoft cryptography. There's a find string for the setup act.log. Echoes out computer name and user's domain, or user DNS domain, probably to capture it and then send the stuff back out. Tries to implement anti-virtualization virtualization techniques using MAC address detection. So large swath of probably ones that would match up to virtual NICs as assigned by VMware, VirtualBox. And it drops DLL. .1.1.104.3. Retrieves OS information. Reads software policies. So it definitely does recon on the system. Tries to access recent files. So it definitely tries to go through and try to get a lay of the land. Probably to try to figure out if it's in a sandbox or not. VBox manage. Computer name, information about system for retrieving username. Get username W. Yeah, lots to do with PowerShell. Reference URLs. Acorn.js. Let's see what the GitHub page is. And then we don't end up with much else besides that. Yeah, so it looks like it's sitting there and actually running through a DLL, but the problem is, we got a bin. And there's what looks like the DL, or DLL. So let's open a new one and let's try a virus total lookup on the MD5. So apparently finds something that references a issue in Acorn. A tiny, fast JavaScript parser. Okay, I'm not entirely sure as to what that has to do with any of this stuff. Unless it basically goes through and parses JavaScript files in order to get the second, third, fourth, fifth stage. Okay, and we take a look at the one that was run through. Wait, also did I click the wrong section? This one was made June 2nd. Okay, so this is the one. Okay, so we're looking at the one. And of course, there's no match for the DLL in question. So this is the older one. Still marked it. Run underneath Windows 7. More of the same in terms of string still points to. Well, this one did not have much in the line of actual execution. Maybe it figures out, okay, anything Windows 7 is too old. There's no way in hell anyone's going to be using this anymore. Suppose. Of course, download is disabled, but it's only a 3K. But yeah, I'd be kind of interested as to what actually would happen. So if we went back to triage and we do files and we search for this DLL, do we find anything? Oh, %20, that's what, just URL encoded white space? Literally a space? As opposed to figuratively? Okay, how about every file that's a DLL? So we get the aspect here mentioning user 32, kernel 32, CLR. It's like a lot of these look like they would just be built in and included. DLLs on the system. Yeah, and it catches all that. Okay, so that was actually what I was looking at. Okay. Then I'm assuming it probably didn't do much underneath the Windows 7. Yeah, that kind of tracks. It just, sorry, you're too old. So I suppose I could rerun this then and just select the Windows 10. See what happens. Oh, yeah, but this is why it's important, especially with anything else, is to go through and actually perform what kind of analysis you can. Okay, so this does actually break it down some more. Where we see the same aspect. Sets the PowerShell or execution policy to unrestricted. We get the aspect of pulling the computer name and the user's DNS domain. Enforcing the unrestricted yet again. To get the boot environment. That is to whether or not if that's informational recon or it's basically just doing this as a pre-check before actually kicking off. And maybe that would explain it, the difference between the hybrid analysis and the triage. So whatever the back end for triage is was caught up in this particular aspect, the sandboxing detections. Whereas when the hybrid analysis was run, it obviously wasn't. But this just kind of underscores the whole aspect as to why it's important to not just take and just run everything through Iris Total. I mean, if you want to avoid issues, then unfortunately you invest the time. Although I am kind of wondering as to what this would actually look like in a paid for instance of like recorded futures, sandbox, or the CrowdStrike Falcon sandbox, or the paid for version of any.run or VMray, or I mean even Integer, to see as to what that would end up breaking this stuff down as. But due to the file size, I can't shove it into at least two of those, and everything else here. This is what we got. But so I think what I'm going to do is it doesn't come right out and tell me that okay, it's grabbing uh, usernames, passwords that might be saved in the browser, or it's grabbing cookie or session cookies or anything else along those lines. But given the fact that we've kind of spread it out, we see what really looks like some odd commands being run through PowerShell, much less forcing the execution policy to be unrestricted. Definitely sets off the alarms. Granted, obviously it's not really a fair comparison, especially with VirusTotal, considering the fact that we are looking at like roughly 2 weeks, give or take. No, about 2.5 weeks as I'm recording this that we're now finally getting detections for this. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to rerun triage just with the Windows 10, just entirely skipping Windows 7. And we'll see as to whether or not if anything's gotten any better, and we'll come back and see as to whether or not if we get a better score this time, as to whether or not if it was able to sit there and they've made changes in the back end to resolve the VM detections. But I mean, this is a clear portion where you need to not have, especially if you're a home user. I mean, they have the free editions, everything else like that. It sucks that you've got to use multiple things. But, I mean, it is what it is. I mean, especially with anything that would not, or that would fall out of your normal routine. This a friend that you haven't touched base with in forever and a day comes out of the blue and, hey, you want to try out my new game? Not happening all that often. I mean, I suppose maybe if you got a bunch of your friends with a bunch of game devs, maybe, but you would think there would be more consistent contact. The silence should kind of set it out as well. I mean, most people are terminally online, so why would they just disappear? Except if they maybe lost their account or actual life happened or they decided to, you know what, screw this. I'm going to just disconnect for a little bit, go outside, take my boots off, take my socks off, and I'm going to put my feet in some grass and some dirt. Not that we're plants, but okay, so I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to rerun underneath triage, get some more up-to-date results. And we'll see as to whether or not if anything shakes out in terms of putting it through here. But, I mean, no detection for Redline or Vidar or anything else along those lines. So this might just be a fully custom Trojan. And see if I can't find anything in regards to the Trojan X for the file, or the detection names too. So let me pause this and I'll get that started. Okay, so we got it going with the two Windows 10 options, 1703 and 2004 as the, what is it, build numbers. We had a quick window, command window pop up for the 1703, and then another one, and I have not seen anything for this. Both set for 30 minutes. Traffic routed through Tor. And we'll kick off the mouse simulation to see as to whether or not that does anything. But I don't really want to launch anything and potentially pollute the process tree. Of course, the sad thing is this thing could be aware that, oh, hey, your IP address comes back as something that's known to be Tor, so I'm just going to go ahead and just shut down. At which point I've wasted 30 minutes. But we'll see as to whether or not if this resolves anything. So while that goes through, don't know. I was going to see about sitting there and filing a report for abuse report to Blogspot, but the link is dead. Just to sit there and take this thing down and prevent anybody else from potentially running into it. And before anybody wonders, I swear that the Blogspot site was down at the time that we looked at it, so just kind of, okay, don't have to worry about anybody else getting infected at the time. And I mean, okay, site's back. The link is broken, so maybe at some point they may go back and try to fix it. So maybe it would be worth it. But so I'm just going to go ahead and pause again and pick back up once we're a little bit further in the analysis. And we'll see as to whether or not if we get a better than a 1 out of 10 detection score for each Windows 10 box. Okay, let that run through, and no change. Still with a 1. So at this particular portion, I mean, the only thing I would probably take away from this is if I can get this particular portion to come back up. that this would have happened. The only thing that effectively would have saved would be standard checks, but across the board, so not just relying on virus total to give you results. It would have to be spread out for virus total, triage, hybrid analysis, any.run, assuming that the size is something that it can handle. And just the sheer I mean, nothing about this sits there and triggers, Trojan, anything else like that. Although, you would typically expect a game not to have to sit there and do find string. Typically, it's not going to open up command. Typically, it's not going to open up PowerShell. Much less sit there and change the execution policy to unrestricted. So, even though it's not giving us an actual negative detection, it should still be something that, okay, see what it does, logic it out, think it through. But yeah, it's a little bit disappointing that we don't get any sort of actual detection from this particular portion here. I may take it and try running it on a Windows 10 VM and just see as to whether or not if it drops anything else I can sit there and potentially use. If I can get a copy of that DLL or anything else along those lines just to try to work it back. But given everything that's happened, I would say definitely Info Stealer. And I mean, I don't see anything here that really applies any sort of persistence. So I think the responses or the actions taken would be quite valid. Nuke and pave the system, and then from a known good machine, work on trying to change out everything. Although if if the session cookies have been stolen, then what? The only real defense in regards to that aspect is to be signed into the service and then force log out all logged in sessions, assuming that's an option provided to you. And of course, every place has got it differently, ran somewhere in their various context menus and the like. So, but there we go. I will probably re-report the Maritas game site or blogspot entry. Just given the fact that it's only this post and nothing good's come of it. But so there we go. One more info stealer from it came from Reddit. Though that being said, all the links and everything else like that will be in the video description as normal. And I will see everybody in the next video. Also, if you have come across any of the stuff like this and you want someone to sit there and take a look, hit me up. Try to do what I can with what I can, but obviously work, family, that type of stuff takes a higher precedence than anything else. I mean, unless there's money, then effectively, okay, then it's work. Or I guess supposedly if you're friends and or family, then I guess that would take a higher priority too, but okay. All that being said, I will see everybody in the next video.